All right, everybody. I'm Àlex, CEO and founder of MarsBased. And in this episode, I will be telling you about my recent trip to California because I think you cannot understand MarsBased without my regular and annual trip to California, more specifically to San Francisco, where it all started in 2013. So, rewinding back to 2013, where I was in Barcelona, I was fed up with my job. There had been a couple years in which Jordi, Xavi, and I had been meeting over dinner, always complaining about our jobs and how miserable our lives were. Considering that we were in the tech sector, we were still doing pretty good, even though it was nearly not as good as it is nowadays. Salaries were not great. Working conditions were not awesome. Were far from being ideal compared to nowadays standards. And more often than not, we were so not aligned with our company's missions or visions or lack thereof that we felt out of place. Jordi was pushing us dinner after dinner to go and create a company. We had been working together. Our careers had been intertwined. Never the three of us at the same time, but Xavi and Jordi worked together as freelancers. They also worked together because Jordi hired Xavi as developer and then tech lead for the company he was working in for creating data. Xavi and I had collaborated in an association in the university I had co-founded. Jordi and I used to create websites for fun as kids, and but never the three of us at the same time. And also Xavi and I knew each other pretty well from doing university together, so we also collaborated a lot there. But we had never worked, the three of us, and it was more or less around towards the end of 2011, early 2012, we started tinkering with a few ideas, few projects. This is a little bit of lore about the company and provides context for the story I will tell a little bit later. But suffice it to say that most of these projects, luckily for us, they never saw the light of day. Why luckily? Because I think that by trying to launch 2-3 projects, one of them, it was kind of like a mobile app for cooking recipes. The other one was a social network for bio producers and bio products. None of them could have gone very far without us being super involved, without prior experience in fundraising or selling or product or marketing or creating companies altogether. However, and this is a very, very succinct version of the story, we learned throughout these experiences that we were good at developing. We were good at creating products, not necessarily good at creating companies or launching them. So we decided to sort of rely or delegate this part to somebody else while we focus on development. That's why we thought, why don't we associate and we create a company, or we just behave as freelancers, Xavi doing backend, Jordi doing front end, I could be doing a marketing side of it, or other aspects like SEO and whatnot, mostly because it came from Java development, and we were not going to do Java. Jordi and Xavi had been developing in Ruby and Angular in previous companies, and so I think that technological stack made more sense than Java, for instance, where you require larger teams to accomplish more or less the same kind of projects. So, long story short, we decided to start something smaller, maybe developing as freelancers, but early on, we thought, okay, let's just turn this into a company and let's see if it floats, and if it doesn't, we'll shut it down. Let's just put the initial commitment of 3,000 euros to create a company, the Spanish equivalent of an LLC, and we'll see what happens. And if we run out of money because we have no clients, then so be it, and we move on to another thing. We can always find another job because we were developers, right? By around the time I decided to quit my job, Xavi and Jordi kept theirs just because they had other obligations. I was kind of like the freer soul of the company, of the group of three. And I left for San Francisco, December 2013. And I thought that if I were to soak up as much knowledge as possible in entrepreneurship, innovation, technology, startups, investment, venture capital, whatnot, it should be in San Francisco, nowhere else, because San Francisco is the cradle of entrepreneurship, is the cradle of pretty much everything I mentioned before. So I decided to set off and take 3 months visa, stay there, and learn from the best and see what happened, right? At the time, to be entirely honest, I was also looking for a job. I had to freelance through my way through these 3 months in San Francisco because it was so expensive. And I thought that 1 year of savings in Barcelona could suffice in San Francisco. Guess what? They didn't. So this goes to say that I kind of like, I took the plunge. I went to San Francisco. I quit my job. There's always somebody crazy, right, doing this kind of things. And I think it's transformational because in that trip, I found a couple of things that they kind of like sped up the process of incorporating MarsBased. The first one is I found the first client for MarsBased, right? It's a funny story. I started going to old events, when you're in a new city, you're trying to network your way through. And so I started going to all kinds of events, but one of them was a Ruby meetup and in the city, right? Because back then we were developing in Ruby on Rails. And I introduced myself at the very end of the event. I think there was some guy from SendGrid speaking. And I introduced myself in the Q&A part. I said, I'm Àlex, and I was not the CEO back then. I'm the founder of a Ruby consultancy from Barcelona, and I asked a question, right? And it didn't go very far. But the thing is, like, there was another guy in the audience, Marcos, from Spain. And at the end of the event, I think he didn't approach me. He sent us an email. Like, he researched the website. He sent us an email. He was looking for a job. He said, like, look, guys, I can freelance for you. I'm looking for a job. And why don't we meet up? And I said, like, happy to do that. But we cannot give you a job because we don't have projects. We haven't even incorporated. We're just starting out right now. And but let's meet for a coffee, see what happens. Turns out we meet for a coffee. And after, we hit it off from the get-go. It was really good conversation. And turns out that he was about to find a job and he wanted to get rid of his freelancing clients, right? He had been freelancing for many years. So he decided to give us our first client, which was a Spanish restaurant in San Francisco, Paella Soleil, project we all know very well in the company because it was obviously not the kind of project that we usually do. It was very small. Probably if you heard the podcast, you've heard a couple of stories about this project, but just not going to explain them here. I don't want to go off this tangent. But the thing is, like, that was our first client. And however small we were, it forced us to create the company, even though we didn't have to, because it was such a small amount of money. We could have delayed that payment. We could have, easily not done that regular way. Because it was under $1,000. It was like something stupid. But Jordi is always very, very strict about these kind of things. It's like, okay, let's incorporate the company. And this way we can invoice. This way we can make everything legal from the get-go. And it sounded like a good plan. Turns out that from the 3,000 euros we incorporated, I don't know how many went to lawyers, notaries, and other vaulters in the ecosystem. But after the first week or something like that, we didn't have even like a third of that. We didn't even have like 1,000 euros left in the bank. So we were not taking any salaries. We said, look, we're going to have some money from this project. It's like 700, I think it was 700 euros, $700, something like that. With this money, we can have, paying expenses until June. And that would have been February, March. Say, why don't we make it until June, see what happens? We don't have any clients. If we don't have any recurring revenue, then we shut down the company And so that kind of like forced me to go a little bit faster. But anyways, before going into that, so that I found the first client, which kind of like made the wheel started to spin a little bit. And the second thing I found is Startup Grind. I was there, and a fellow community member in Barcelona sent me an email saying like, look, I know you are in San Francisco. I attended this conference last year, Startup Grind Global Conference. Why don't you go this year? It was a really good conference. So I begged for a discounted ticket because the ticket was like something stupid, like $800 or $1,000. I don't even remember. I didn't have that kind of money, and I had never paid such amount of money for the conference. I was definitely not going to do it, but I saw on the website that they have like broke founder discounts. So I said, okay, let's try it. Let's give it a shot. And while they didn't offer me a full discount or like a gratuity of the ticket because it was pretty late, they gave me 50% discount. And I thought that was good enough. So I must have paid 300, 400 quid for that. I attended the conference, but while I was researching the attendees agenda and whatnot, I saw that they were looking for somebody to run Startup Grind in Barcelona. And they wanted to expand Startup Grind, which they had like a bunch of chapters in Australia and the US and maybe a couple in Europe, but definitely they were not beyond 50, 70 chapters worldwide. They wanted to expand to Europe, and they were looking specifically for people in Barcelona, Milan, Stockholm, Munich, all of the big cities in Europe. And so I decided to apply. And lo and behold, after a couple sessions or 3-4 sessions with the founder, Derek, and with Francisco at the time, director of community, I got the position. So I said, look, if I'm going to play the entrepreneurship lottery, I might as well play it with 2 tickets, Startup Grind and MarsBased. And that's why I spend every year a few weeks around this time of the year in San Francisco, because it reminds me of that time where I found the first client, where I found Startup Grind, which eventually both things were transformational for the company, right? You cannot explain MarsBased without Startup Grind, maybe. And so I think that's, it's always good. That's why every year I attend the conference, because ever since that year, I have been attending as a chapter director. The first edition I attended as an attendee, as a regular attendee, but I got to meet the team and I was already in the process. So I was like, wow, this looks cool. I will be able to be part of something bigger. At the time, it was sponsored by Google for Startups. Maybe it was a good opportunity for MarsBased as well. I could network with high-profile people, could talk to some of the speakers, some of the attendees, grow my network in California and in the US, where obviously I haven't had any sort of contact before that, and I didn't have any kind of network. But thanks to Startup Grind at the beginning, I started getting one. And also because I was, chapter director for Startup Grind, that gave me sort of the credentials or the authority to meet higher ranks in Barcelona, such as like City Hall and people in charge of several departments in the government and whatnot, to present Startup Grind and project, which eventually, kind of like trickled down to MarsBased in a sense. And we built a synergic relationship, a symbiotic relationship between the two of them. So as years went by, and this is one thing I also have experienced, is that Americans love stories, right? And I've been pretty much meeting the same people for 10 years now, 9 years. And they love the fact, or I think most of them appreciate the fact that when they met me, I didn't have a company. And the next year I went back and I had 3 employees. And the next year I had 5. And the next year I had 7. And this year I went there and I have 20, right? And I'm still alive as a company, which is pretty surprising. And I keep going there every year with bigger clients. So they have seen the evolution. Maybe this has turned also into the narrative of, oh, wow, so he must be a real company because it comes every year is bigger, every year he gets better clients. So it's not like a one-off visit that we get a lot of this around here. And so, every year around February, April, depending on when the Startup Grind conference is, I go there for a week of conference, which is good. And a week or two of business development. As I mentioned, we started working for Paella, which eventually we didn't make practically any money out of that project. I think it's safe to say nobody listens to this podcast anyway. Give me a shout if you listen to this anecdote. But over the years, we started working with some other people, because one of the very first people I reached out to when I was in San Francisco the first year was Thoughtbot, a leading Ruby on Rails agency back then. And I kind of befriended Àlex, one of the managing directors, or the director of the San Francisco office. I don't remember specifically what his role was at the moment. And it was good, because the next year he quit the company, and we started talking more and more, because Thoughtbot didn't outsource. But he said, like, look, I want to have friends in the community. It's good that you guys are creating this sort of Thoughtbot in Barcelona. Let's keep in touch. And then he quit the company, started freelancing, and still in there, he created Cylinder Digital, a boutique agency and consultancy also for Ruby on Rails and product. And he started relying on us to outsource some of his projects. And thanks to him, we started working for 2, 3, 4 projects. I think he sent, we started working for C40, the consortium of big cities against climate change, founded or funded by the Clinton Foundation. We started working for Epsilonate. We started working for Atypica, a high-growth startup from San Francisco. We started working for Valuation Metrics. So, a bunch of clients coming our way from these relationships, specifically not only from Àlex, but also from some other people in the industry. And so over the years, we started getting more clients. And then we started working for bigger brands like Startup Genome 2018, and then Spin 2018 as well, which was bought by Ford first, and then sold to Tier last year. And so we got into the corporate sector because we started working for, Ford, thanks to this acquisition, then Citadel because they acquired Valuation Metrics, and HP in 2020, if I remember correctly. We've also got in touch, we've been in touch with many, many other companies throughout the years. We have been discussing projects with the likes of DocSend, for instance. We have been discussing projects with Moody's. We have been discussing projects with Salesforce. We have been discussing projects with other big companies in the area. Sometimes they materialize, sometimes they didn't. But it's good. We've got some reputation, we got some brand. Some people know us there. Obviously, we're outsiders of the scene because we're not permanently based there. And, Americans want to have management across the road. They want to go talk to people across the roads and just talk to the people in charge. And production can be anywhere else. They don't care, but management has got to be there. But luckily, we really don't need that. We've had a few clients that we've never met in person. And anyways, so, business development there. It's not easy, but it's also not very difficult if you're not desperate. You don't have to rush up things. If you can afford going once or twice a year there, spend sufficient time to meet a couple of times with everybody and meet people throughout the years. Some people that we always meet, but we've never had the chance to work with. Thinking of Danielle from Vietnam, we meet pretty much every time I go there, but we never worked together. Or Pavan from Greybike. He sent a few project proposals, never got around to working with them because of lack of capacity. Maybe we didn't do the technologies, or folks that even like Google and things like that. I don't know. It's good. As I mentioned in one of our previous podcasts, last year, 2022 was the first year where the revenue coming from the US was greater than the rest of the world for us. So I think it was 53% of our revenues came from the US. So definitely shows that we are strong there, shows that we are good value for money. While we are not cheap, at least for European standards, for Spanish standards especially, we are cheap for the US. There are people just, I think Citadel itself, they must pay like $300 an hour. At least to all the consultancies they work with, they pay $100 to us. So we are really cheap. We're so cheap to them. There's definitely a lot of elbow room for improvement in that regard, but it's good enough. It's good enough money for us. It allows us to raise salaries. It allows us to leave sufficiently content here in Barcelona or in the rest of the Iberian Peninsula for most of our employees. So that's why we love working with Americans. We think they're great. They appreciate honesty. They appreciate our transparency culture. They like our over communication. They totally appreciate that we're not a mañana company, trying to postpone things, being dodgy or silent about, radio silent about certain things when we are not going to deliver. On the contrary, we're on top of things, very proactive. So I think Americans appreciate these. They're very business driven, as we are too. We like to sign contracts as fast as possible. We don't want to delay things. Like I remember with Cylinder, we signed a contract pretty much the same day we started talking about a project. It's like, oh, can you do that? Yeah, we'll figure out the contract later. Can you start developing tomorrow? Yeah, sure. Okay, let's do it. And so we did it. So that's why 9 years going there, 9 years growing the company, 9 years of enlarging our network and building our brand there. Well, we don't do anything specifically to cater to that community outside perhaps of this English version of the podcast. And then, occasionally going there. I think that is good enough for us. We're great. We're happy about having these kind of contacts and clients and friends over the US and across the pond. And Startup Grind is very relevant as well because I also used that week of a conference that is held in Redwood City, barely 40 minutes south of San Francisco. And I meet potential customers there as well. I can also invite people to the conference and tell them, look, you can enjoy the conference. Here's a complimentary ticket. Come over and say hi to me and let's talk about projects maybe. And it's in the heart of Silicon Valley. So for me, it's easy to go get an Uber and go to Palo Alto, Mountain View, or anywhere else and just have meetings with people, very interesting, high profile people while at the conference, commuting back and forth. So that's why 1 week this year, it's been 1 week off, 1 week of conference, 1 week of business development. But, maybe a few years before sometimes it was 1, 2 months, 3 months even. That was just going there it's expensive as fuck, but if you can afford it, why not? And it paid off multiple times. As I said, like every time I go there, more or less every time I go there, I get a new client for the company. So it pays off. Even if I spend, I don't know, 20,000 spending a month in San Francisco, the projects I'm going to get there are more likely way bigger than that. So it compensates any expenses that I have there. This year it's been different. I've also enjoyed a little bit of time off. Like it's funny because my friends in San Francisco, they were like, okay, so you've been coming here for 9 years. You've never done any tourism. I had very rarely ventured away from San Francisco outside of Silicon Valley for obvious reasons and for business mostly, or exclusively. Once I went up to Napa, to Sonoma to enjoy some wines with some friends, but that was it. I think that's pretty much everything I did outside of San Francisco. A day in Santa Cruz, my friend Pete Begum in 2017 or 18, and that's it. But I never took time off. I never, while I'm there, I'm just going to make sure that every damn second counts for my company because it's money that I'm spending. And California and the US are pretty fucking expensive. So not like, I'm not going to squander any money or a minute while I'm out there. But this year, I planned some trip around California, a road trip with my girlfriend and her 5-year-old around California. I took 2 weeks off, and it was magnificent. Despite all the disturbances caused by the natural disasters that there had been in the previous weeks, floods and snowstorms and heavy torrential rains and heavy winds and whatnot, tornadoes and things like that. We couldn't enjoy as much as we wanted. Some things were closed. Big store was closed, so we couldn't do the 101 completely. We couldn't go to certain parts of Death Valley, or Yosemite, because that's the way we did was San Francisco, go down Santa Cruz, Monterey, then we fucked off and went to Death Valley, checking some sequoias on the way in Henry Cowell State Park. Then and then after Yosemite, before they closed it, because the ice and the mountaintops was melting, because of extreme heat temperatures. So they went from snowstorms, 2 meters of snow, and while we were there, it was 35 fucking degrees in Yosemite. So snow started melting. It was causing some floods. We had to leave. And so I went back to San Francisco. It was phenomenal. It was good. Totally recommend it. I definitely didn't want to go off this tangent. Just wanted to explain a little bit why I've been away. And I think that you cannot explain the story of MarsBased without understanding why I go there every year, why I go to San Francisco, Silicon Valley, why I spend so much time with Startup Grind, why I invest so much time in these friendships and network and relationships in the Valley, in the Bay Area, because they open doors. And if you go there once, people are going to help you. But if you go there twice or thrice or more, people are going to help you way more, just because they know that you're going to come back. A lot of people, 95% of people who go to Silicon Valley just go there once. And if you just show up once, they can help you, but they know, in a way, they're cognizant of the fact that they will never see your face again. So, if they don't help you that much, doesn't really matter, because they're never going to see you again. What are the chances, right? Whereas if you've been showing up 3, 4, or 5 years, they know you're the real deal. They know they can help you because it's gonna help them back. And yeah, it worked for me. It will work for others. It worked for others. I know of other people that, like me, go every year, even multiple times, and it's definitely good for their business. So if you can afford it, if you think your potential clients are there, it's expensive, but it's worth it. And now that I've visited all of it, it's also absolutely fucking beautiful. All right, so not much more from my side. Couple of quick updates from the company, because this is kind of like an extraordinary podcast where I just ramble on for half an hour. I'm going to keep it short. We're 3 minutes away from half an hour. Just going to give a couple quick things. First off, we're going on our company retreat in Formentera. So, close to Mallorca, Ibiza, all of these beautiful islands in Spain, at the end of May, after this podcast is aired. So if you are interested in going and you're looking for a job and you happen to coincide with one of the openings that we've got right now, like a front-end designer, front-end developer, full-stack developer, or a growth person that wants to become the co-host of this podcast in both versions of the podcast, both languages of the podcast, English and Spanish, hit me up, Àlex@MarsBased.com, send your CV, send your application through the website, contact us through Twitter, because we want to have you, and the company want to have you in our company retreat. Second is we're launching the new website. Should have been launched before the retreat, as I announced, but we signed a couple contracts that we didn't expect. One of them is travel tax-free, the company behind all of these tax-free or tax exemptions for in the duty-free areas in airports. I don't really know how that works specifically, never buy there. But we signed a contract with them, totally unexpected. We were the most expensive proposal for the three of them. And they let us know, we justify it. Turns out we did a great job at justifying it. We got the contract, and we extended our contract with Boston Consulting Group. We signed a very short contract at the beginning of the year, but turns out they're really happy. And so we extended this contract. Looks like we're going to be working for a long time for them. And also, well, that's also news from this morning. We'll be extending the contract with Hireflix, a Spanish startup that we signed also, I would say, the beginning of this year, end of last year. I think it was the beginning of this year. It's a small contract, but, keeps getting extended. That's good. And it seems like we're doing a great job in both of these projects. Super excited about these news. We're on a good track. We are also looking for other kinds of talent. So if you want to send us your CV, even though our openings don't reflect the kind of position you want to have, let us know. You never know, because we didn't know 1 year ago that we wanted to hire a growth content person, right? Or a podcast co-host. we never know when we will need another project manager or product person. So send us your CV. We definitely looking to meet a new client, new talent. And that's all from my side. So thank you so very much for listening. Give us a thumbs up, give us a review, 5 stars, whatever rating system in whatever platform of choice for podcasting that you use, because this helps the podcast. And if you got interesting stories you want to share with us, reach out to me, recommend speakers, recommend stories, give us some feedback. It all helps. Thank you very much.